All right. Well, good evening. Yeah. All right. Well, let's see. Is that better? Is that coming through? I have to read bifocal style here. Well, good evening. Yeah, thanks for having me. I was joking with several friends and family members about how a non-Quaker was asked to come to a Quaker gathering and talk about how to be Quaker. Thought it was kind of a funny irony, and I thought, man, I've learned so much from the Quakers I know. The best thing I could probably do is just stand here and say how grateful I am to know so many good Quakers, and then to give us 20 minutes of unprogrammed silence. But unfortunately, I'm a Mennonite, so I'm not going to do that. But no, that's seriously one of the Colin Saxon has been sort of my gateway into Quakerism, and he'll probably give you a hard time if you ever talk to him about me about how many questions I have, and I'm just like so interested in like clearness committees. What is that? That's so fascinating that you guys help each other like navigate really difficult questions. So I personally have really benefited from conversations learning about Quakerism and the values that y'all bring. But for me, like Sean said, I've been working at Everence it'll be 12 years this month, which is a fun milestone to celebrate. And I get to sit with families and individuals and organizations, different folks, largely people of faith, but sometimes not. But the common denominator is people who are really trying to be wise with their financial decisions. They want to be good stewards. And one of the things that I've kind of noticed both in my own life as I've gotten older and I have children and my family lives in this sort of intentional community and we look at the sort of global problems of our world and it's kind of this constant question of like, what can I do? How do I do anything that doesn't hurt somebody else? You know, like we have this golden rule of love God and love our neighbor, right? These concepts that feel really good to say, like, I'm just trying to love God and love my neighbor. And maybe I'm gentle or kind or generous even or thoughtful. But sometimes it feels like, man, there's got to be more. Like, there's got to be more that we can do than just like maybe be kind. And being kind is certainly a really important thing. But this tension that we all feel is how do we care for ourselves? How do we provide safety for our family, but also go into challenging spaces and meet people from different backgrounds and with different challenges and struggles, and how do we do that in a beautiful and lovely way? And part of that is with our finances, right? Like, how do we steward the resources, the money that we have? How do we make decisions about, do I shop here or there? Or do I invest here or invest there? What am I even doing if I do that? Or who is this harming? Or am I loving God and loving my neighbor well with my financial choices, with my decisions around money? And if you grew up like me, you had a pastor father who always believed that God would provide, which is good, but also knew how to pinch two pennies together and make $50. You know, like the guy never found a sale he couldn't get an even better deal from. And I learned to build a framework around life that was very financially oriented. Like, is this a good deal? If it's not a good deal, I don't want any part of it. And even if it's like, my value is I want fair trade, good quality, good things, but it's like 10 times the price of the thing I can get at Walmart. It's like, ooh, there's a tension here, right? Like we feel that tension because I want to support the things that are good in the world and the type of world I want to create, but I also like a good deal, right? And oftentimes, unfortunately, those things don't go hand in hand because we don't get to see the labor that is used to create that, or the costs or the advantages that are taken of other folks. And so, as we think about these tensions that we have to hold, especially for me and the people I work with, and thinking about how do we steward the resources we have, I want to share a little bit about something I've been calling an impact gap. And it's this idea that we all have some money, maybe, or maybe we don't all have money. Maybe some of us are in debt. You know, that's reality. But many of us have money, we have resources, and they're doing something, right? Most of us don't just have cash lying in a mattress or underneath our bed or something like that, and that's all of our source. We have it in a bank, we have it in an investment account, we have a retirement account or something, right? We have capital. And what I've found in my work is that there is often this gap where people don't really understand what that capital is doing in the world as it is versus what it could be doing. And so I've kind of started calling that this impact gap. And what I see my role is at Everence and generally in my life is trying to help close that impact gap so that we understand the capital that we have while it's sitting there, while it's being available for us to spend, or while it's being invested for our future retirement. It actually is doing things in the world, right? It's not just a dormant thing. It's helping provide mortgages, or it's providing, capital for businesses to launch new products or build brand new buildings or hire new workforces or fire workforces or do different things. Build data centers, all of these kinds of things. And so part of my role and what I see is trying to help close that impact gap, again, not out of guilt or pressure, but as a way to live an aligned and integrated life with saying, this is what we value. I want to love my God, and I want to love my neighbors as well as I can. And how can I do that with every aspect of my life, whether it's my time, my talents, my energy, what I have to give, my resourcing? How do we close that gap? And I think of that in large terms in a financial way. So one of the resources that was given as I was preparing this talk was this quote by Isaac Pennington. And I don't know if that's been read widely, but I'm going to read it again because I think it's a really nice quote. He says, "Our life is love and peace and tenderness, and bearing with one another and forgiving one another and not laying accusations against one another, but praying for one another, helping one another up with a tender hand." I think it's really interesting, this tenderness that comes through there, that he literally uses that in every version of it. And I think we often tend to hear that in a very personal way, like an individual to individual, like I'm going to forgive you, or I'm going to bear your burden personally, one-on-one. We're going to walk through this together. And I think that's super, super true in how we speak to one another, how we handle conflict, how we care for people nearby. But I want to suggest too that maybe it's not just this personal idea, but maybe it extends beyond the edge of our proximate relationships and extends in this globalized society that we live in. How do we think about giving a tender hand, a hand up to our global neighbors? Because the world we live in today is very different than the world Isaac was in, and our lives reach far beyond the people in this room. Through what we purchase and what we buy, through the savings that we have, through retirement accounts, like I mentioned, we're connected to people across the entire world, whether we like it or not. And so part of my question in trying to think about this impact gap is, what is our money doing while it's sitting in a retirement account or while it's sitting in a bank account? So I'm going to start with this story. A few years ago, I started working with actually a Quaker family. We'll call them Mark and Elaine. That's not their real names. So don't go try to find Mark and Elaine in the Quaker world, because I know it's small. Y'all know each other. Yeah. We'll go with Fox. So these were seriously thoughtful people, rooted deeply in their faith, regular attenders of their meeting, had clerked their meeting at one point, all the committees they've been on, just very, very deeply rooted in their context. They cared very deeply about peace and community, about justice. And they gave regularly. They were active. If there was a clearness committee, you better bet Mark was asked to be on the clearness committee. Just a really sharp person, really thoughtful. And financially, not doing incredible, but doing well. And they had received an inheritance. And so they were like, we got this money. It's more than we have had. We heard you help people do good with their money. Can we talk to you about how do we do that? And so on the surface, everything, really seemed aligned. And so I asked the question, how do you want your money to reflect your values? Like, what is important to you? What do you believe? And they said, good things like attending the meeting, giving, trying to live simply, and supporting causes that we feel are in alignment with bringing about justice and peace. And so I kept asking a little bit more, and we discovered their sort of version of the impact gap. Basically what they believed their money to be doing was not really what it was actually doing. And so while many of the aspects of their daily life reflected this striving for peace, this loving God and loving neighbor, really the large portion of their financial life outside of their giving and trying to shop local and, support local businesses, all their investments and retirement funds were basically disconnected from those values. They didn't know what companies they owned. They didn't know what the companies did. They didn't know what industries they were invested in. They had really little idea about what those businesses were doing and what kind of impact they were having on their global neighbors. And that realization for them was quite powerful, because, again, when we invest the money, it doesn't sit still. So, yeah, they were participating with things that maybe they would have felt objectionable. And they might not have been willing to say, I support this, or this is what we definitely want our profits and money and things to be derived from. So even though they were, personally peaceful, their money was not. And so there was a moment for Elaine, I think, when she said something to the effect of, like, I've spent years trying to live at peace, and building a world of peace. And I had no idea our investments were doing so much harm elsewhere. And again, it wasn't guilt. There was no pressure, but it was this sort of awareness that led to a bit of a transformation where, gave us a time to almost launch our own sort of clearness committee. Like, what do we want this money to be doing in the world? How do we want to enact less harm around us? What is going on in the world? What are the opportunities out there? What exists in ways that we can activate capital for good purposes? And what would it mean to reduce that harm? And so we began to see money in a different light, that it's not this scorecard or, I just need it to grow and grow and get to bigger numbers because now we've got this inheritance. We can be, so financially free and secure and we don't have to have fear anymore. Maybe we can do something where we activate this capital for good and use it as a tool for participation. So some of the things they settled on as really important things were like expanding access to education and healthcare, expanding access to affordable housing, regenerative agriculture. They had farming backgrounds, so, regenerative agriculture, sustaining the land, caring for that was really important. They wanted to use any money that they invested to advocate for justice within the companies that they were buying. We call that shareholder advocacy. And they wanted to participate in these companies in any and every way they could to try to promote peace. And so one of the interesting things to me about this impact gap wasn't just that it transformed sort of how they were thinking about the capital that they had amassed or saved in their retirement accounts and in their bank. But it actually helped them understood, like, this is what's really, we can use our money more effectively, in all aspects. So in not just how we invest it, but they actually increased how much they gave to charity and important causes. They felt like we have a good understanding of what we have enough, and it enabled them to give even more than they had thought they could, and they were already giving quite a bit. They started asking questions like, what is enough and what is this money for anyway? We don't want to die with so much money and put that on our kids either. We want to use it. We want to see the benefits now. And so they started giving more money to their kids and supporting memory building and making time for their family in a different way. And all in all, their anxiety went down because now they didn't have this inheritance that they were trying to figure out, what do we do with and how do we organize this, or what is this all going to do for us? They could see how it was integrating into their life, how it was enabling them to do things that were really important to them, while also trying to line up with this peaceful world they're trying to build. So as I think about this Micah 6:8, do justice, love mercy, and walk humbly. Some questions to think about as we try to embody this, to do justice, where is our money participating and who does it affect? When we think about loving mercy, how can our resources bring about healing? And when we think about walking humbly, what is enough? In Gordon Gekko's terms, more. There's never enough. You can always have more. And how do we get to a space where we say we have enough, and how can we be good stewards? So Isaac Pennington's words are both, I think, about a personal piece, about how we treat our neighbors, how we listen, how we reconcile. But I think it's also about a systemic piece that we can activate in the world through our investments, through how we shape our resources, through how we spend our money, through how we give it. So, friends, as you think about your retirement account, it is not just about your future. Your retirement account is actively shaping someone else's present. Your investments are not just numbers on a page or on a statement that you get in the mail. They are about participation in building the world. And so I think as we talk about what does it mean to be a Quaker today, maybe Quakers aren't just people who bring about a peaceful, reconciliatory approach to their personal relationships, but they're people whose entire lives, including their financial lives, bear witness to this peace. So I'll close with a query. Few questions to keep you thinking is, what is your money doing right now while it is invested? Where might there be an impact gap between your desire for peace and justice and your participation in this world? And finally, what is one small step you could take toward bringing those things closer together? So I will close with a moment of silence, Quaker silence, because I can't resist. We have to. So I'm going to give us a moment just to hold these questions lightly, to listen and reflect, and then I'll close with a short benediction.